Okay, so like, have you ever read some of the laws in the Old Testament and just been like, what?
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Some of them sound so out there, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you can't wear clothes made of two different fabrics. What's that all about?
Or how about the one about, not boiling a baby goat in its mother's milk? It's like, okay.
Seriously. It's time for a deep dive, folks. We're tackling some of the strangest sounding laws in the Old Testament. And trust me, we're going to uncover some fascinating stuff.
These laws might seem bizarre to us now, but believe me, they held deep meaning for the ancient Israelites.
All right, so let's start with this whole fashion faux pas, mixing wool and linen. Why was it such a big no-no?
Okay, so picture this. You're an Israelite living in a world that, to them, is meticulously ordered by God. Everything has its category.
Yeah, like clean and unclean, holy and not so holy.
Exactly. And they saw this order reflected everywhere. So when you start mixing things like wool and linen, two totally different materials, it's like you're, messing with that divine system.
Like a cosmic fashion crime.
You could say that they were called to be a distinct people set apart. And mixing fabrics, it could have symbolized blurring those boundaries, a kind of impurity.
Interesting. So it's not so much about the actual clothes, but more about what they represent.
Right. It's about symbolism, maintaining that separation and distinction that was so central to their identity.
And I've heard there might be a connection to those pagan practices going on around them.
You're on the right track. Some scholars think this law might have been another way to differentiate the Israelites from their pagan neighbors. There's evidence that some pagan priests actually wore mixed fabrics during their rituals.
So it was like a big nope, not us kind of thing.
Exactly. A way to say we serve a different God and we do things differently.
Okay, makes sense. All right, let's move on to this baby goat situation. Seriously, why is this one mentioned like 3 times in the Old Testament?
3 times? That's got to tell you something, right? It had to be important.
Definitely. So spill the beans. What's the deal with not boiling a kid in its mother's milk?
Well, think back to those Canaanite neighbors again. Archaeologists have found some evidence suggesting they might have used this practice. Maybe in fertility rituals or something similar.
Oh, so God was telling them, don't be like those guys.
It's a strong possibility. And remember, this is all about maintaining their unique identity as God's people. So yeah, drawing a line in the sand.
But hold on. If they were so focused on being different, why not come up with their own unique practices? Why ban something the Canaanites were already doing?
That's a good question. It's possible that it wasn't just about being different, but about rejecting anything even remotely connected to those pagan deities.
Like a spiritual cleanse.
Yeah, you could think of it that way, purifying their faith and their practices. But there's another angle to consider, too. Think about it. Even today, the idea of boiling a baby goat in its mother's milk is kind of disturbing.
Yeah, no kidding.
It feels wrong.
Right.
It goes against our natural sense of compassion. So this law might reflect, and this might surprise you, an early concern for animal welfare.
Wow, that's pretty progressive for that time period.
It is, and it also shows a deep respect for the mother-child bond, which was a huge deal in Israelite society.
It all ties back to that sense of order and respect for God's creation.
Right. Absolutely. And isn't it interesting how this whole idea of separating things, even food pops up again later in Jewish law?
Yeah, the kosher laws. No mixing meat and dairy.
Exactly. Many scholars see this prohibition against boiling a kid in its mother's milk as a precursor to those later dietary laws, a kind of foundational principle.
So even thousands of years later, those ancient practices are still influencing people's lives today. That's pretty powerful.
It is. It shows how deeply ingrained these ideas became in their culture.
All right, so we've explored some seriously strange laws, but what's the takeaway for us today? I mean, we're not exactly worried about mixing fabrics or baby goats in our cooking, are we?
Not usually, but think about it this way. These laws were all about setting boundaries, about the Israelites being distinct and living according to God's values.
So even though we're not bound by those specific rules, the underlying principles still apply.
Right. It's about figuring out what our own lines in the sand are, what principles we're willing to stand up for, what practices we choose to reject.
It's like a challenge to live intentionally and authentically, even when the world around us is constantly trying to blur those lines.
Exactly. And that's something we can all think about, no matter what our beliefs are. What are the things that define us? What makes us who we are?
Ooh, now that's a deep thought. I think we'll leave it right there. Something for everyone to ponder.
Definitely food for thought.
And that wraps up another deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Until then, keep thinking, keep exploring.
And remember don't mix your fabrics.
And definitely lay off the baby goat stew.
We're just kidding. Sort of. See you later.
Bye, everyone.